welcome to my monthly capsule video. This is going to be for June mostly, but I might include some July things just because I've been traveling and my son is home for the summer from college, and so my time is limited. So I'm trying to seize the moment right now because the house is quiet. This month, or the month of June, I should say, quite an abundant month in that things were growing in the garden. And I have mentioned in one of my last videos, in our cottonwood tree in the backyard, there was a crow's nest. And in June, I came home from work one day and I heard the voice of a young crow. I realized that they had hatched, or maybe it had been a while, but it was the first time I had heard the young crow's voice. And so I left some food for the crows, just to let them know, like, hey, I'm a friendly person, a friendly human, and I'm chill around your new family. I was a little late in the game, and they had already fledged the nest, or at least the one crow that I saw. So there was a young crow that was already out of the nest. I learned that the parent crows are very protective of their young, and so anytime I went out into the garden to water, which is necessary at this time of year, there's no rain for about 3 months, they would dive bomb me because their fledgling was on the ground nearby. So pretty much the month of June, I barely was in the yard because I just did the bare minimum that I could. So though I was super excited to get to witness a crow family in our yard, I kind of had to give them reign of the yard until their fledgling knew how to fly. And that happened a couple times. I think they had at least 2 fledglings that I could tell. So that was exciting. And it also ties into the cards that I pulled for this month, which I'll share in a little bit. But so it's an exciting time of year for sure. And my fledgling is back from college, which is interesting. I realized too with the Crow family, it was almost like a parallel to my son and his situation. This was his first year in college. And so in a way, that's like he's the fledgling and, went away to college. But luckily, we see him on breaks and in the summertime. So like the Crow family, we stay close. So that was a cool parallel. What was happening outside was also happening in my family. And I went to visit family later in July in New Jersey, and we had a trip to Princeton. There are just some places I like to go there. There's a bookstore. And I can't remember the name of the bookstore, which is terrible, but I did get this card. So on the Princeton University campus, they have really cool stonework on the buildings there. And this is a dragon, so that's cool. I love dragons. If you haven't watched my videos before, you'll hear more about that. And then I got this card of this goddess, who I think is a Nana, this postcard. I've always loved this sculpture or a statue, and so anyway, it was cool to find this at the bookshop too. I'll go into my journaling a little bit, my journaling practice, before I go into my card decks. I've mentioned in other videos that I got the ritual planner, which is this book here. I'll show you a page here. Let's use August as an example. So basically you can record your weekly card pulls, and this is perfect for me because I do 3 card draws. But I have found that this book is just way too big for me. It's very bulky. The spiral, what do you call this? The spiral spine of this notebook kind of just gets in the way of writing. And I've worked with it all the way through June. And I love many things about it. I love that there's a separate calendar and there's astrological stuff in here, and that there's new moon and full moon pages, but it's just too big, and ironically there's not enough room for me to write. I often had to like cram what I was trying to write, and it kind of hindered the days that I wanted to write more. So I decided to give up on this notebook, which feels disappointing because, it's a waste of paper and resources. And I'll keep this, but it's so big. I don't really have storage for something this big. And I should have known better, but I really wanted to have a tarot journal like this. But on the upside, I ended up just getting my own bullet journal. This is just the standard like A5 journal dot grid with the back pocket. And I decided after working with the ritual planner that I learned about what I did use, what I didn't use, and what I needed. So I customized my own journal, which feels really good. Let's see, I need to move this burner out of the way. This is some pine resin, by the way. And I've had quite a journey with trying to figure out burnables. And that is with incense and resins. I might have a separate video on that. It's kind of a large part of my spiritual practice. So yeah, maybe I'll share about that at some point if anyone's interested. I think there's not too many personal things. So I basically created, let's see if you can kind of see here. So I have like a quick reference guide, which I think is fun, for 3 card spreads, and questions to ask. I just like to have that as a reference. And then I even did like a quick reference for the cards just for fun. Quick, like short little excerpts about what the card meanings are. So a quick reference. Then I did I do a year ahead? Oh yes, I did. So I did a year ahead. The monthly energy overview, which is when I pull a card a month. And then I had my June overview, and then my June draws and reflections. And then I also have my deck schedule and monthly decks, which you can see I'm like hyper organized. And this is a really plain journal. There's nothing interesting about it. So there's nothing beautiful to look at. And it's just a very practical journal. And that's just who I am. I love to create artwork. I love to draw. But this is really just very specific to journaling and writing. So for year ahead, I have like my cards that I pulled. I'm not sure I have full moon spread here. That's separate. And then these are the cards I've pulled each month so far and those messages. And then I have room to journal and reflect on those later. So this is my June overview and my three card draws. So you can see that I didn't, do every day. I wrote in all the cards this little chart here that shows me how many of the majors I've had and the suits, and anything that came up like 3 or more times I really paid attention to. So these are the decks that I worked with for this first week. I was traveling, and so I wanted to bring the decks I was still using at that time. So I have the cards I pulled, and then on this side I have what happened that day. It helps me with my memory, or seeing like the tie-ins that maybe the way things that happened in my day reflected what the cards had presented in the morning. So for example, here's what I pulled on this day, and then I would just do my quick writing about each card, and then I would reflect on them in the evening. And that's where I just have all the time I want to journal about it. Or I can take my time in the morning and journal more about it here. So you can kind of see how I'm doing that. I'm just writing little boxes. I write tiny, so this works for me, and write what cards I pulled. I'm also noting the moon phase because I think that's interesting. So this has been working great. I'm thankful to the ritual planner because it showed me what I needed and what I used, so I can be more efficient and not waste another journal and just create exactly what I need. And that's what I love about bullet journals. That's what I have for my own personal planner. I found this little pouch at the bookstore in Princeton, and it slides right on here, and it holds the two writing instruments that I use often. I have my this is just a Sumo Grip refillable pencil, so I really like to have like as minimal waste as possible. Ironic, because I'm not using my big journal I bought anymore, but it's my general mode. So you can refill the eraser, you can refill the pencil leads, and I've had this for like years, and I love these pencils. And then I have this, I've shown this before. This is the TWSBI Eco piston fill fountain pen, so there are no plastic cartridges that you need to throw out, and you can see your ink, which I love. And so I'm really boring. Again, I just use black ink, and this is the one I use, the Noodler's Black. And this lasts me, I would say, at least 2 years. And that's writing every day in multiple journals with this pen. So I did recently get a fine or extra fine nib. The one drawback to this pen is you can only have one nib per pen. You can't interchange the nibs. And so the ones I had been using before were fine, and I got extra fine so I can write more in a smaller space, and it uses less ink. So it's kind of a win-win for the way I write. So that's awesome. But I just love that these two fit in here, so I can take this with me wherever I go, or I can take it off and put on my planner if I'm taking that out with me during the day. So I'm super excited about this little journaling setup. My card of the month was Ace of Earth Nettle, and I'll read just a little bit about this this is from the Herb Crafter's Tarot. And I'll just read a little bit about this card. So this has to do with health and wealth may begin with a sting. Taking next steps, even if they hurt, letting your gifts take root in the physical world. Nettle stops us when it brushes against our skin and stings. Pay attention to what is calling. It may be a familiar weed, but it's potent medicine. Receiving the gifts of the earth and building on the path of your ancestors. So this was truly pertinent to the month of June and even into July. I thought it was very ironic because this card showed up a lot through June in another deck that I was using for a specific kind of reading. But I just started getting acupuncture this month. So I thought this was kind of a little cheeky way to just kind of think about the sting of the nettle and the healing elements of the acupuncture needles. And it also was a very ancestral month. So I mentioned how the crows reflected what was happening in my life. The ancestral aspects to my month showed up in the two decks I was drawn to work with. The Spiral Tarot by Kay Steventon, and this one is out of print. This is still in print. This is mass market. This was mass market, but it's out of print. This is the Ancient Feminine Wisdom deck. I just call it the Ancient Goddess Wisdom deck, but this is the long, lengthy, kind of strange title to me. But this is also by Kay Steventon and Brian Clark. But she is the illustrator of both of these decks. So this deck was reserved as a particular ancestral deck, and I have used it for that, but I was called to work with it this month, so I went with that. And so what was interesting to me is ancestor work is like year-round for me, but I definitely associate it more with the autumn season and winter. That's usually when I'm drawn to certain practices. But ancestral messages kept coming through this summer. So that was kind of a new thing for me. And so I just heeded the call and I worked with this deck. And so my deck is trimmed. I've shown this before. This was one of the first decks that I ever got for myself, I believe. So it's very nostalgic in that way. And I actually filmed a whole video, a walkthrough of this deck, of both of these decks, because I am a Kay Steventon artwork fan. And so this deck is really interesting. It's dedicated to her Celtic grandmother, and she is honored in the minors, which take place in the 1800s, which is when her grandmother was born in the 1800s. So they're very different. As you can see, the artwork is very different than the majors. You know, they're from the 1800s, they're not as detailed, and the majors are highly detailed, full of esoteric symbolism. And so the majors have mythologies that Kay Steventon was familiar with. So Mediterranean gods and goddesses and mythologies, Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, and Arthurian legends. So it's a very interesting deck in that regard. This was put out in 1997, I think. So it's an older deck. I don't see it too much on videos, but you know, that's just who I watch maybe. But the artwork really deserves a larger cardstock. And I have a secret wish in my heart that this will get reprinted in large cardstock, or larger cardstock, because these are tiny. I've trimmed them down and they're super tiny. But anyway, I just absolutely adore this deck, and it was perfect, and I'm so glad I heeded the message of working with ancestral energy through this deck, and just working with this deck all month, because I had set it aside, like I had said, for just a particular kind of ancestral work, and I was called to work with it just in depth all month for just my daily readings. Another really cool thing I noticed about this deck once I started working with it is Hecate shows up about 3 times prominently in the majors. And so she's here on the death card. She also is referenced in the moon card by this triple-headed dog or Cerberus figure, which isn't exactly tied to her, but can be. But this is sort of an amalgamated goddess image here. She is also, which is the other one? She also shows up, she also shows up in the moon here, which is, there's this triplicity here of, it's one that I'm not too familiar with. It's Hebe, Hera, and Hecate. And yeah, so I have, if you haven't watched my previous videos, I have been kind of deep diving into Hecate's mythology. It's been really powerful. So I thought that might have had something to do with why I was called to work with this deck, perhaps. Just a theory. It's just so expressive, and it's just it's such a clear reader. So I worked with this deck, and the Oracle deck, as I mentioned, is this one, I keep calling it the Ancient Goddess Wisdom deck. These are some of my favorite backs. I mentioned that in the in-depth video I do of both of these, which I'm still editing, so I will be putting that out after this video. This was another deck I had gotten simply because it was Kay Steventon's artwork. And it was before I started diving into any kind of goddess mythology whatsoever, which I've talked about here and there, but that's a newer thing for me as of this last year. And so I was drawn to this deck as well, which is interesting because it's all Greek and Roman goddesses. And it's an amazing oracle deck. It worked incredibly well for me. From the keywords to the card meanings, some of the same cards showed up throughout the month that were very pertinent to my month. Two of the ones that showed up a lot were, well, Amphitrite showed up, which is about depth of feeling, emotions, riding the waves. You know, when you're dealing with ancestral stuff or family, riding the waves of emotion totally are something that come up, and conflicts and grief and loss and all those things that come up. So that was one that came up frequently, as well as, I'm not sure how you say this, oxo, which is increase. This is about like abundance. And there was another, just Gaia showed up a lot as well, and she carries similar meaning to the Oxo card. So this was just a perfect companion for the Spiral Tarot, and here's Hecate. She shows up in this deck as well. So that was just interesting to me to see how she was present in both of these decks, and also the tie-in to ancestral work that I actually was truly doing in the month of July. There was a ceremony that took place for a loved one that passed. So yeah, it was like a highly pertinent deck pair that I was drawn to work with. So with all my planning, as you could see in my journal, I am learning to deviate from my rigid ways, deviate from my very, I shouldn't say rigid, but like my very, I like having a whole month dedicated to one deck, but I'm excited by the freedom I feel to just work with a deck that I'm drawn to instead of the one that I planned on working at. And so there is, there's flexibility within my organization, I suppose, or my vision for like what deck captures the vibe of a season. And so this captured not necessarily the vibe of the season in the external world, but more of the internal world and what was happening for me in my life. Although these both really do capture the bright colors and abundance of nature this time of year. So they do make really beautiful summer decks as well. Books. I have been reading this one that I was on my reading list for November, which is the month of ancestors for me, like October, November. But I started it now, and so this has been interesting to read. I've been taking notes, and there's some things I've been taking away from it. It's not like a ton of things. Some of it's very basic, but just good to hear about ideas on honoring ancestors. And this is my bookmark that makes me so happy to use. Anyway, and I also have this book. I got this a while ago. This is by Claire Goodchild, who also has done some oracle decks, which I can't remember the names of. I do not have them, but you might recognize some of the artwork. It's really great and beautiful. I just haven't read too much of it. Like I skimmed it a little bit, and I feel overwhelmed with like the family tree stuff because there's family drama and like, there's just mysteries in the family and estranged family members, all that good stuff that comes with ancestors, right? So it's been interesting to work with that. And then I am also thinking about getting back into this one. I kind of stopped halfway through because it just wasn't resonating at the time, but I did have some great practices that I took away from this, and readings that were really powerful. So I think I might want to get back into this, but this is using divination to connect with ancestors, and it's structured monthly. So like different kinds of energy. For example, in June, you're working with solstice magic, or July, weather magic. So it's interesting it introduces different forms of divination, and I have started, because of this book, I do have a pendulum that I do use on occasion. Okay, I feel like I have so much more to say, but my phone is about to run out of batteries here. So I'm going to leave it at this for now. Hopefully I'll have my other video edited, the walkthrough of the K. Steventon decks that I featured here. I hope you all are doing well. I hope you're hanging in there. Times are really intense, and so I'm just sending everyone my love, and hope you have a good support system with you. Thank you for hanging out. I really appreciate you being here. Take care, and I'll see you on the other side of this video.